Hey guys, welcome back. I'm going to be starting in the middle of chapter 6 where I left off yesterday. We were right where Harry had seen the mandrakes for the first time, and remember those plants that looked like the big, ugly, crying babies, and if you don't wear your earmuffs, their cries can be fatal. And Professor Sprout was just about to put them in groups to work with the baby mandrakes. 4 to a tray. There is a large supply of pots here. Compost is in the sacks over there, and be careful of the venomous tentacula. It's teething. She gave a sharp slap to a spiky dark red plant as she spoke, making it draw in the long feelers that had been inching sneakily over her shoulder. Harry, Ron, and Hermione were joined at their tray by a curly-haired Hufflepuff boy Harry knew by sight but had never spoken to. "Justin Finch Fletchley," he said brightly, shaking Harry by the hand. "I know who you are, of course, the famous Harry Potter. And you're Hermione Granger. You're always the top in everything." Hermione beamed as she had her hand shaken too. "And Ron Weasley, wasn't that your flying car?" Ron didn't smile. The howler was obviously still on his mind. "That Professor Lockhart is something, isn't he?" said Justin happily, as they started filling their plant pots with dragon dung compost. "Awfully brave chap. Have you ever read his books? I would have died of fear if I'd been quartered in a telephone booth by a werewolf, but he stayed cool and zap. Just fantastic." "My name was down for Eton School, you know. I can't tell you how glad I am I came here instead. Of course, Mother was slightly disappointed, but since I made her read Lockhart's books, I think she's begun to see how useful it will be to have a fully trained wizard in the family." After that, they didn't have much of a chance to talk. Their earmuffs were back on, and they needed to concentrate on the mandrakes. Professor Sprout had made it look easy, but it wasn't. The mandrakes didn't like coming out of the earth, but didn't seem to want to go back into it either. They squirmed and kicked and flailed their sharp little fists and gnashed their teeth. Harry spent 10 whole minutes trying to squash a particularly fat one into a pot. By the end of class, Harry, like everyone else, was sweaty, aching, and covered in earth. Everyone traipsed back to the castle for a quick wash, and then the Gryffindors hurried off to Transfiguration. Professor McGonagall's classes were always hard work, but today was especially difficult. Everything Harry had learned last year seemed to have leaked out of his head during the summer. He was supposed to be turning a beetle into a button, but all he managed to do was give his beetle a lot of exercise as it scuttled over the desk, avoiding his wand. Ron was having far worse problems. He had patched up his broken wand with some borrowed spellotape, but it seemed to be damaged beyond repair. It kept crackling and sparking at odd moments, and every time Ron tried to transfigure his beetle, it engulfed him in thick gray smoke that smelled like rotten eggs. Unable to see what he was doing, Ron accidentally squashed his beetle with his elbow and had to ask for a new one. Professor McGonagall was not pleased. Harry was relieved to hear the lunch bell. His brain felt like a wrung sponge. Everyone filed out of the classroom except him and Ron, who was whacking his wand on the desk. "Stupid, useless wand!" "Write home and ask for another one," Harry suggested, as the wand let out bangs like a firecracker. "Oh yeah, and I'd just get another howler back," said Ron, stuffing the wand into his bag. "It's your own fault your wand got snapped." They went down to lunch, where Ron's mood was not improved by Hermione showing him the perfect coat buttons that she had made in Transfiguration. "What class do we have this afternoon?" said Harry, changing the subject. "Defense against the dark arts," said Hermione at once. "Why?" demanded Ron, seizing her schedule. "Have you outlined all of Lockhart's lessons in Little Hearts?" Hermione snatched her schedule back, blushing furiously. They finished lunch and went outside into the overcast courtyard. Hermione sat down on a stone step and buried her nose in Voyages with Vampires again. Harry and Ron stood talking about Quidditch for several minutes before Harry became aware that he was being closely watched. Looking up, he saw a very small, mousy-haired boy that he'd seen trying on the Sorting Hat last night, staring at Harry as though transfixed. He was clutching what looked like an ordinary Muggle camera, and the moment Harry looked at him, he turned bright red. All right, Harry, I'm Colin Creevy, he said breathlessly, taking a step forward. I'm in Gryffindor too. Do you think it'd be all right if I could have a picture, he said, raising his camera hopefully. A picture? Harry repeated blankly. So I can prove I've met you, said Colin Creevy eagerly, edging forward further. I know all about you. Everyone's told me. They told me how you survived when you know who tried to kill you and how he disappeared and everything and how you've still got a lightning scar on your forehead. And a boy in my dormitory said that if I develop the film and the right potion, the pictures will move. Colin drew a shuddering breath of excitement and said, It's amazing here, isn't it? I never knew all the odd stuff I could do was magic till I got my letter from Hogwarts. My dad's a milkman. He couldn't believe it either. So I'm taking loads of pictures to send home to him. And it'd be really good if I had one of you. Maybe your friend could take it and I could stand next to you. And then could you sign it? Signed photos? You're giving out signed photos, Potter? Loud and scathing, Draco Malfoy's voice echoed around the courtyard. He had stopped right behind Colin, flanked as he always was at Hogwarts by his large and thuggish friends Crabbe and Goyle. Everyone line up, Malfoy roared to the crowd. Harry Potter's giving out signed photos. No, I'm not, said Harry angrily, his fists clenching. Shut up, Malfoy. You're just jealous, piped up Colin. His entire body was about as thick as Crabbe's neck. Jealous, said Malfoy. He didn't need to shout anymore. Half the courtyard was listening in. Jealous of what? I don't want a foul scar right across my head, thanks. I don't think getting your head cut open makes you that special myself. Crabbe and Goyle were laughing. Eat slugs, Malfoy, said Ron angrily. Crabbe stopped laughing and started rubbing his knuckles together in a menacing way.
Please call 202. Mr. Kashyap in the building. Please call 202.
Be careful, Weasley, sneered Malfoy. You don't want to start any trouble or your mommy will have to come and take you away from school. He put on a shrill voice, making fun of Ron's mother. If you put another toe out of line. A group of Slytherin fifth years nearby laughed loudly at this. Weasley would like a signed photo, Potter, said Malfoy. It'd be worth more than his family's whole house. Ron whipped out his wand, but Hermione shut Voyages with Vampires and with a snap and whispered, Look out! What's all this? What's all this? Gilderoy Lockhart said. He was striding towards them, his turquoise robes swirling behind him. Who's giving out signed photos? Harry started to speak, but he was cut short as Lockhart flung an arm around his shoulder and thundered jovially. Shouldn't have asked. We meet again, Harry. Pinned to Lockhart's side and burning with humiliation, Harry saw Malfoy slide smirking back into the crowd. Come on then, Mr. Creevy, said Lockhart, beaming at Colin. A double portrait. Can't do better than that. Then we'll both sign it for you. Colin fumbled for his camera and took the picture as the bell rang behind him, signaling the start of afternoon classes. Off you go, move along, Lockhart said, and he went off towards the castle with Harry, who was wishing he knew a good vanishing spell, still clasped to his side. A word to the wise, Harry, said Lockhart as they were entering through a side door. I covered up for you back there with young Creevy. If he was photographing me, too, your schoolmates wouldn't think you were setting yourself up so much. Deaf to Harry's stammers, Lockhart swept him down a corridor lined with staring students and up a staircase. Let me just say, handing out signed pictures at this stage of your career isn't sensible. It looks a bit big-headed, Harry, to be frank. There may well come a time when, like me, you'll need to keep a stack handy wherever you go. But, he gave a little chuckle, I don't think you're quite there yet. They had reached Lockhart's classroom, and he let Harry go in at last. Harry yanked his robes straight and headed for a seat at the back of the class, where he busied himself with piling all 7 of Lockhart's books in front of him so he could avoid looking at the real thing. The rest of the class came clattering in, and Ron and Hermione sat down on either side of Harry. You could have fried an egg on your face, said Ron. You better hope Creevy doesn't meet Ginny or they'll start a Harry Potter fan club. Shut up, snapped Harry. The last thing he needed was for Lockhart to hear someone say Harry Potter Fan Club. When the whole class was seated, Lockhart cleared his throat loudly and silence fell. He reached forward, picked up Neville Longbottom's copy of Travels with Trolls, and held it up to show his own winking portrait on the front. Me, he said, pointing at it and winking as well. Gilderoy Lockhart, Order of Merlin, 3rd class, honorary member of the Dark Force Defense League, and 5-time winner of Witch Weekly's Most Charming Smile Award. But I don't talk about that. I didn't get rid of the abandoned banshee by smiling at her. He waited for them to laugh. Only a few people smiled weakly. I see you've all bought a complete set of my books. Well done. I thought we'd start today with a little quiz. Nothing to worry about, just to check how well you've read them, how much you've taken in. When he handed out the test papers, he returned to the front of the class and said, You have 30 minutes. Start now. Harry looked down at his paper and read, Number 1, what is Gilderoy Lockhart's favorite color? Number 2, what is Gilderoy Lockhart's secret ambition? Number 3, what, in your opinion, is Gilderoy Lockhart's greatest achievement to date? On and on it went, over 3 sides of paper, right down to number 54. When is Gilderoy Lockhart's birthday, and what would be his ideal gift? Half an hour later, Lockhart collected the papers and rifled through them in front of the class. Tut, tut, hardly any of you remembered my favorite color is lilac. I said it in Year with the Yeti. And a few of you need to read Wandering with Werewolves more carefully. I stated in Chapter 12, my ideal birthday gift would be harmony between all magic and non-magical peoples. He gave them a wink. Ron was now staring at Lockhart with an expression of disbelief on his face. Seamus Finnegan and Dean Thomas, who were sitting in front, were shaking with silent laughter. Hermione, on the other hand, was listening to Lockhart with her best attention and gave a jump when he said her name. But Miss Hermione Granger knew my secret ambition is to rid the world of evil and market my own range of hair care products. Good girl. In fact, he flipped her paper over. Full marks. Where is Miss Hermione Granger? Hermione raised a trembling hand. Excellent, beamed Lockhart. Quite excellent. 10 points for Gryffindor. And now to business. He went behind his desk and lifted a large covered cage onto it. Now be warned. It is my job to arm you against the foulest creatures known to wizard kind. You might find yourself facing your worst fears in this room. You know no harm will befall you while I'm here. I ask you to remain calm. In spite of himself, Harry leaned around his books for a better look at the cage. Lockhart placed his hand on the cover. Dean and Seamus stopped laughing now. Neville was cowering in his front row seat. I must ask you not to scream, said Lockhart. It might provoke them. As the whole class held their breath, Lockhart whipped off the cover. Yes, he said dramatically. Freshly caught Cornish pixies. Seamus Finnegan couldn't control himself. He started laughing, and even Lockhart couldn't mistake that for terror. Yes, what's so funny, he said to Seamus. Well, they're not very dangerous, are they? Seamus choked. Don't be so sure, said Lockhart, wagging a finger at Seamus. Devilishly tricky little blighters they can be. The pixies were electric blue and about 8 inches high, with pointed faces and voices so shrill it was like listening to a lot of budgies arguing. The moment the cover had been removed, they started jabbering and rocketing around, rattling the bars and making bizarre faces at the people nearest them. Right then, Lockhart said loudly, let's see what you make of them. And he opened the cage. It was pandemonium. The pixies shot in every direction like rockets. 2 of them seized Neville by the ears and lifted him into the air. Several shot straight through the window, showering the back row with broken glass. The rest wrecked the classroom more effectively than a rampaging rhino. They grabbed ink bottles and sprayed the class with them, shredded books and papers, tore pictures from the walls, upended the wastebasket, grabbed books and bags, and threw them out of smashed windows within minutes. Half the class was hiding under their desk, and Neville was swinging from a chandelier in the ceiling. Come on now, time to round them up. They're only pixies, Lockhart shouted. He rolled up his sleeve, brandished his wand, and bellowed, Pepipski Pestronomi. It had absolutely no effect. One of the pixies seized his wand and threw it out the window, too. Lockhart gulped and dived under his desk, avoiding being squashed by Neville, who was falling a second later from the chandelier. The bell rang and there was a rush towards the exit. In the calm that followed, Lockhart straightened up, caught sight of Harry, Ron, and Hermione, who were almost at the door, and said, "I'll just ask you three to get the rest of them back in the cage." Then he went past them and shut the door behind him. "Can you believe him?" said Ron. "He just wants to give us some hands-on experience," said Hermione. "Hands on," said Harry. "Hermione, he didn't have a clue what he was doing." "Rubbish," said Hermione. "You've read his books. Look at all those amazing things he's done." "Things he says he's done," muttered Ron.